All right, so today we're going to be reading 4 chapters. We'll be reading chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7 from part 2. And this is week 8, and we're halfway through. So we're about halfway through the book and about halfway through our charted course together. So yeah, so hopefully things start to click into place for everybody. I guess before we start, let me just, I just want to send some gratitude out. I want to give thanks to Walter and Lau Russell for all their beautiful work and all the teachings that they left behind and their legacy. And I also want to give thanks to the University of Science and Philosophy for continuing to carry their work forward. And yeah, thanks to all of the beings and entities who are here with us, all of our guides and allies and ancestors who support us on our journeys and our paths. We give thanks to your presence here, all those entities who would support this work. Thank you for being here with us. Okay. All righty. So yeah, I think to the best of our ability, let's go ahead and try to read straight-ish through. I know it's challenging, but let's try to read through all 4 chapters if we can. Absolutely pausing if if there's just a question that's really burning or a comment that's really burning, we'll pause and we'll take it. But we'll try to read through so we make sure we get through the material, and then we can know how much time is left at the end for discussion. BJ.
I think 2 weeks ago, we did basically what you're suggesting, although we did just sort of high level comments, right? Without getting into discussion. And I think that was really helpful. Like
Great.
Read through just high level comments and read through. And yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up because I was hoping to propose that again. I think it worked well.
Great. Thank you so much, BJ. I really could use the support figuring out how to strike the best balance for everybody to get the reading done together, and also to make sure that everyone who has a question or a comment has time to say that too. So thanks, everyone. Okay, anyone want to start?
I'm happy to jump in.
Okay.
Did you say May?
No, I'll read. I actually
go.
really have a large affinity for chapter 4. That'd be great. All right, great. Cosmic consciousness. Beyond the genius is
not that one.
We're actually on page 113, chapter 4 in part 2.
Oh no.
Why the chapters numbers repeat?
I read the wrong.
Unknown.
Okay, I'll pass.
Okay.
I was wondering, I'm like, did we go backwards? I'm sorry. I still love that chapter.
Yeah, it's a good one.
What page? I'm sorry.
113.
Thank you. Would someone else, or I can read if you want me to. It's up to you. All right, I'm there.
This one. Okay, go ahead.
Love, go ahead.
I'll read. Chapter 4, the source of power. God, the creator, is power. There is no other power. All energy lies within the stillness of the one magnetic light of God. God is mind, the intelligence of the universe. In God's mind is one idea, which God knows as one whole idea. In God's mind is desire to give creative expression to that one idea by thinking it into parts. Desire in the light of mind is the power quality of mind. Desire is the soul of mind, the will of mind. God expresses the desire of mind to manifest his idea by creating this electric wave universe. This electric universe is the sole product of God's mind. All product of God or man is the result of desire of mind to create product. The power to create product is in mind. It is not in the product. Product has no power in itself to produce itself. This assumption that product has power within itself to produce itself is another of man's illusions which have deceived the senses of man during these early days of his unfolding. It is as though the architect gave to his cathedral the power of creating itself. The cathedral is an expression of desire of the architect to give form to the idea of his knowing. The power to create the idea is in the knowing. The idea of the cathedral already exists. The eyes of the spirit can see its spiritual image as clearly as the eyes of the body can sense it in stone as product of his knowing. The expression of power to create the idea as product lies in the electric action of thinking idea at rest in the light of mind into the two lights of waves of emotion which simulate that idea. As servant of mind, electricity gives moving form to the idea by performing the work necessary to produce it. The power to thus produce does not lie in electricity nor in motion. It lies in desire of mind only. Without that desire, creation could not be. Without desire of mind in man, his power to create could not be. Mind is light at rest. Desire of mind is expressed through waves of light in motion. The expression of power in waves is not power. All of the power of the ocean is in its stillness, whether expressed or not. Likewise, all of the power of light is in the stillness of its knowing, whether expressed by light waves or not. All expressions of energy spring from rest, seek a point of rest, and return to a condition of rest. The power of a moving lever is not in the lever nor its motion. It is in the stillness of its fulcrum from which it borrows its ability to manifest the power of its fulcrum. God is the fulcrum of man and of the universe. Neither man nor any moving thing in the universe has power within himself to do anything. All power expressed by man must be extended directly from the Father in heaven to his father-mother lights of earths and heavens, which manifest him. The mechanical principle by means of which power is expressed by the Creator is in the light waves of two-way motion which record his two-way thinking. Waves are two-way cycles which are divided equally to express the two desires of mind to create form images of mind imagining, and to destroy those forms sequentially for reforming. Waves of motion spring from the stillness of the universal equilibrium. They are the universal heartbeat which manifests eternal life and power in God's stillness by eternal repetitions of simulated life and power as expressed in waves of motion. Waves of motion express the power of desire for unbalance and motion, which is in light at rest, and they also express the opposite desire for balance and rest, which is in motion. Desire in the one light of mind is positive. Its expression in the two lights of opposed motion is negative. Every expression of power in nature is negated by its opposite expression. The senses are limited to the perception of but one of these negations at a time, then only in small fractions of whole cycles. If the senses could record the whole of each cycle both ways, they would record stillness, not motion, for every action would be voided by its oppositely flowing reaction.
Great. Thanks, PJ.
You're welcome.
So I just want to check, do some of these concepts and patterns start to feel like they're being repeated? Do they start to feel like, oh, wait, I think he said this before, maybe in a slightly different way?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he's describing this. It's actually quite elegant and simple. You know, the core of his teaching is rhythmic balanced interchange. You know, it can be shortened into 3 words. And it creates an incredible amount of complexity, of course. But he just sort of he comes at it through this book by describing it from this direction, and then describing it from this direction, and then describing it from this direction. So yeah, I'm hoping that some of these descriptions start to feel like, okay, this feels familiar. This feels like, and you start to sort of form a working model of it, or a picture of it, or a sense of it. And
I think the thing,
go ahead,
go
BJ.
ahead.
Yep.
I think that the things that stand out to me the most from this chapter is again the idea of desire, and that's the power, and then also the one thing that stands out also is like the unmoving, the still point. Yeah, just to say that.
Yeah, thanks. Diana?
Those stood out to me too, BJ. And there was one other thing that I liked. Ra says that the limit of the viewpoint is the source of all distortions. And Walter Russell's saying the same thing. It's what we can't see. It's what we can't see that gives rise to the illusion of sequence and parts and movement.
Yep. Right. My brief addition to this chapter is, I don't know, will this focus? Probably not. Come on, focus. Anyway, it's the Matrix of Mind card. I've been really studying this system of the archetypes, and Ra talks about how the Matrix of Mind is the conscious mind, and willpower. And willpower is strongly bundled with desire. And Ra says something along the lines of, it's the magician. It's called the magician because the matrix of mind is filled with the magic of all which is yet to come. And to me, it means like it's where all the creation begins in the magician, in the matrix of mind, through desire. And at our level, at their density, it's a co-creative desire. So it's our personal desire. We can identify our own desire, and we co-create it with God. Because in this chapter, the very first sentence, God the creator is power. There is no other power. All energy lies, so it's like just a reminder of where all the juice comes from. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share.
Aaron, if you hold your card up one more time, it's closer to your face than closer to the camera. So back, no, oh, there you go. That works really good. You're hysterical. There you go. Yeah, that's neat.
Yep. Okay, let's read chapter 5. Who else had their hand up to read?
I'll read a little.
Great.
Chapter 5, this sexed electric universe. Still magnetic light, the still magnetic light of the Father of all creation is one. The one light is the positive principle. It is cause. The moving electric mother-father lights of all creation are two. The two are opposites of each other. The two negate each other. They are the intercommunicating nerves of the universal body, like those of man's body through which he senses things. They have not existence save an awareness of each other. They are but mirage extensions of mind, imagining which senses that which they but manifest. Sorry, I didn't read that one very well. Each electric opposite conditions the other with sex unbalance. Each sexed condition gives unbalance to the other, to separate each from each, to increase the power of each, to oppose each. Each then gives of itself to the other to void the unbalanced condition of each other. In order to effect balance in each must become the other. The charging one must discharge, and the discharged one must charge. Avoidance of unbalance can only come that way. Likewise, repetition can come only that way. The electric universe is the negative principle. It is effect. The two moving lights of the electric universe are two equal halves which express themselves in opposite directions. Their sole purpose is to oppose. Opposites which violently oppose and void each other can never become one, nor can they attract each other. Sex is the division of a balanced equilibrium condition into two equally unbalanced conditions, which negate each other periodically for the purpose of repeating the two unbalanced conditions. Sex is the creative principle. It is the dual desire force in mind for expressing its one idea. Without a division of the one unconditioned light into two seemingly conditioned lights, creation could not be. Wow. Sex is not a thing, it is a condition of a thing. An electrically balanced condition of anything is sexless, whether it be a man, woman, electric battery, or the atmosphere. A sexed condition is an unbalanced condition. An electric battery, which is fully charged, is dually unbalanced by the opposite electric pressures of compression and expansion. These two opposite unbalanced conditions violently desire to return to the oneness of balance from which they were divided into two. A short circuit between the two poles of the battery will give it that balance. When we say it is dead, for it will no longer perform work by expressing its desire for balance. An unbalanced atmosphere will violently seek a balanced condition, depending upon the intensity of the unbalanced condition. When calm follows the storm, it means that desire for balance has gone out of it. For when balance has been attained by rest, motion is no longer possible. Wow. The sexed condition of unbalance in man is exactly the same in all phenomena in nature. An unbalanced sex condition in man demands balancing in the same way, and its violence depends upon its electrical measure of unbalance. When that desire is satisfied and balance is restored, man is as sexless as the dead storage battery, and for the same reason. Man is recharged into a sexed condition by his heartbeat, by the food he eats, and by his in-breathing, out-breathing. These are the generators which recharge the dead storage batteries of all the universe into sexed conditioned live batteries. A sexed condition and electric condition are identical. Electricity conditions all sexless matter into its sexed condition by dividing a pressureless condition into two opposite pressures which desire release from their opposition. All of the work of the universe is performed as a result of that desire in unbalanced matter to seek rest in a balanced condition. Wow. This is a sexed electric universe in every effect of motion, whether it be in the heart of a giant sun or in the petal of a meadow violet. And they're blooming right now. Every action of motion in the universe is a result of sex desire for motion from a state of rest, or for rest from a state of motion. These two sex desires of electric action and reaction are the result of the two desires of the Father to manifest as one light through the extended mother-father lights, which interweave his idea of creation into the multiple forms of that idea and void them periodically for the purpose of repeating them. Oh. The desire for two-way motion and equal action and reaction is reflected in the dual electric desire to give for receiving, for regiving, and to unfold for refolding. Wow.
Great. Thanks, May. Diana?
Thanks. I'm so eager to make this fit with the law of one. I don't know if that's an appropriate use of our time, but it helps me. So I'm going to ask a question, but we don't have to go too deep into it if it doesn't seem useful right now. Would Russell's word desire more or less equate to the first distortion, free will, the creator desiring to know itself? And then Russell's word sex, which he says is the creative principle, would that equate to the second distortion, love, the prime mover, the logos as distorted from the creator into something that can experience itself? And then would love then act on light to create the two opposing forces in the electric universe? Is that the connection that others are making here? I'm not sure that I'm grokking how I see how there's the still point. That's the positive aspect. Russell seems to be saying that the uncreated universe is the still point, and then that the created universe is the negative pole of that, and that it's seeking to go back to the oneness. But within that negative pole is sex, the action of division into these distorted parts that are constantly seeking to rebalance each other so that they can poof, like, I don't have a word besides poof. So that's what I got. If anybody can help sort that out, if you think now's a good time, I'd appreciate it.
Great. So yeah, so I think a couple of refinements I would offer. At the level of logos or love, there is not yet light. So there is not yet charge. There is not yet the negative principle. So light is the point at which God uses sex and the polarity and the positive and negative charged lights, the father mother lights, generate at the point of light, the creation of light. So that's the third distortion. So we don't get into sex division until the third distortion, is my understanding. At the second distortion, we're still in the mode of the logos, but the logos has not yet manifest its desire, has not yet manifest its light. BJ?
That resonates for me too, and because the where I take the sex, idea, I guess, that he's pointing to, it seems to be kind of corresponding to what seems to be like material reality, like what seems to be more like more distorted, more seeming to exist as separate from. And I take the desire that he's pointing to be more second distortion, love. That's just the sense that I'm making of it. It's like, what is it that wants to happen? What do I love? What am I interested in? As a fractal of creator, that desire like sort of splits and then creates light or sex. Anyway, yeah. And I really appreciate hearing your thoughts. It clarifies in my mind to kind of bounce it around.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate this. I see Kent's hand up. If I could just respond quickly.
Mhm.
Yeah, what I got stuck on was sex is the creative principle, because in my mind, love is the creative principle. And I was trying to make that all make sense to me. But I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense to me too. So I just have more study to do. Thank you.
Well, just real quick, I think when he says sex is the creative principle, it's like sex is how creation unfolds, but desire precedes all of that. And desire is in the mind of God, or in the logos, or in any co-creating entity who co-creates with God. And then one other thing I want to point out is we've got positive and negative used in a variety of contexts. The positive and negative principle are distinct from positive and negative charge. So just watch for that. Yeah. Kent?
Okay. So could somebody list the distortions again? First, second, third? Anybody who knows it?
Yeah. So the first distortion is free will. The second distortion is the logos, or love. And the third distortion is light, or intelligent energy.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. May?
I just wanted to mention, seems to me at some point, I saw a picture, and I know this is a little, it's still, just think of it in terms of the light. When the sperm meets the egg and insemination happens, there is a light that forms, that happens. And I find that so gorgeous as a visual in this discussion, because we are definitely creator beings working hand in hand with the divine and with our logos as sub logo. I put enough subs in there. Anyhow, I find that beautiful. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know I was going to be reading sex a million times. I find that funny too. Okay.
Sex.
Okay. I know.
That was funny.
Kent, are you complete with your question? Just want to make sure.
I think he nodded and put his hand down.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks. The other thing, I think I've underlined this before, but the other thing that feels like a good idea to just point out is, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, God's two desires. This is really interesting. There's there's the desire to create, there's the desire to manifest, the desire to sort of unfold the infinite idea, the infinite power and potential in the mind of God into manifestation, into product, into form. And then there's the corresponding desire to also be one. And so once it's manifest, then the manifest aspect of creation has inborn in it the desire to be back with God and to be one and to not be separate. And that's the dynamic tension that creates this engine, this duality engine of the father mother. Yeah, go ahead, Diana.
Thank you. I'm sorry I haven't been doing my homework, or I might have fewer questions, but maybe this will help somebody who's listening later. So just so I can get this straight, there's the uncreated universe and there's the created universe. And the created, well, there's the still point and then there's the created universe. The created universe is what Russell keeps referring to as the negative aspect, right, of those two. Did we just encounter that in this chapter?
The negative principle.
Okay. The negative principle is the creation.
Right.
The thing that's trying to go home.
Yep.
And then within the creation, you have sexed opposites, things that are thrown into imbalance that are seeking each other, right? Okay. That's helpful to me. When Gary and I were working on the concept guide, we were grappling with what distortion is, because it's like you can be distorted away from the power and purity of the one original thought, right? And then you can also be distorted between pale scales of opposite qualities, right? And my brain is trying to connect that back to what Russell is saying too, and see if the what we unraveled actually makes sense based on this book.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I love all of our efforts to, to build a bridge, to continue to build a bridge of the concepts that we're a little bit more familiar with in Law of One and what we're reading here, because my my sense is that we're talking about the same thing, and they're just telling it in different ways. And sometimes they illuminate the concepts from the different directions. Illuminate. That's my experience. They illuminate each other and make them more full in our understanding, which is wonderful. Yeah, Kent.
Yeah, second paragraph on page 119. That one surprised me. Opposites which violently oppose and void each other can never become one, nor can they attract each other. I mean, that sounds kind of like it could be the negative path, but then he does say that they void each other. Now, if they void each other, doesn't that mean that they become one?
They don't become one.
But they do void each other. So
they do void each other, but not by joining. They never touch.
Okay.
They become still. They fold back into unity, and then they re-emerge as the other. So positive charge goes to 0 at the center of wave fields, and then it re-emerges as the negative, traveling outward towards the edge of the cube. And the negative, once it gets to the edge of the cube, goes to 0 because it's run out of energy. And then it rejoins the void, and then it re-emerges as the positive. They all polarity, and this is not metaphysical polarity. This is not positive and negative path polarity. It's a difference. All electrical polarity or light polarity interchanges with one another, and they never touch, and they never become one. And Walter Russell he reasserts that over and over again. And the reason why he does that is because he's trying to communicate and build a bridge with physics and science and chemistry. And he's trying to essentially try to dispel what he believes are misunderstandings in the current the current physics of his time. And that'll become more apparent when we get in part 3, where we get into some diagrams and stuff.
Okay, so this about violently opposing each other. Do you draw a parallel between that and the negative path?
So I do think that there are correspondences to be made between these charges, the positive and negative charge, and the metaphysical positive and negative path. But Walter Russell doesn't talk much about the negative path. He doesn't really treat it much. He says everything is goodness, and if it's not goodness, it's just confusion, human confusion. And I tend to think that the positive path is, metaphysically speaking, to travel on the positive path is to be interested in walking towards the light, which is walking towards the sun, which is walking towards unity in the positive principle, in God at the center, which is like the unity point. And the negative path is interested in darkness and the dark power, which is kind of away from the center, and it's out towards the edge of space. And I don't know if that is a one-to-one correlation, but I've contemplated the same thing. How do these physical principles of positive and negative correspond to the metaphysical principles of positive and negative? And it's a really rich question, and let's keep considering it.
Okay.
BJ?
All right. Very good.
I had some things that I wanted to say, but I think we should keep moving. So maybe I'll come back to it.
Okay. You sure?
Okay, I'll say. Just what it was bringing up for me, hearing from you, Kent, of like, wait, does one not become the other, or do they? Yeah, it's like a thought that was helpful to me was like thinking of right and left. Right doesn't ever become left. It needs to come back and resolve itself before we become left again, or something like that. Like, and what that was making sense to me is like, ultimately, there is only oneness. There is only the idea, and everything that seems to come out of the idea is illusory, is illusion. And so it's like it brought me back to the idea of like, product doesn't create product. Like light doesn't create dark. Light resolves itself, and then it can be dark. Like anything that can be expressed as separate from the one whole idea can't become another thing, because it never was a thing to start with. So product can't become product. And yeah, so to me, it's like the seemingness, the illusion, anything that is in any way a distortion can't become a different distortion. It's already a distortion. And then it's also nothing, or everything, or the one thing. And then it can become or seemingly become another distortion. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you, BJ. Yeah.
Ross says distortions are rendered transparent.
Do you have that quote up? Oh, okay. Interesting. I don't remember that. I want to check that out.
Did I make it up? No, I didn't. Jim, do you remember that?
Say it again?
Distortions being rendered transparent.
No, I don't remember that.
I'll find whatever it was that makes me remember this, and I'll put the something somewhere.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, so I just want to offer one quick, hopefully helpful metaphor, which is our breath, just to try to make some of these abstract concepts just really present for us. We breathe constantly. And I think we can look at that process that we do all the time as a representation of what we're studying. So when I breathe in, the atmosphere becomes me. And then there's a still point, and then I breathe out, and that breath becomes the atmosphere. And that breath that's happening is constantly happening. It's a part of the universal rhythm. It's like how I'm geared to the universal heartbeat. And at all scales, there's breath, there's rhythm, there's heartbeat, there's in and out. There's a constant exchange between the positive and negative charges. And at the beginning point and the end point, they return to zero. They return to God. So manifestation is constantly blinking in and out, in and out, in and out of existence. And the material universe is constantly dipping back into the infinity of God and then coming back out into existence. Now, we don't perceive it. We don't tend to perceive it because it's happening, it's happening really fast, and it's happening across all scales. But I think the breath, and contemplating our breath and how the breath comes in, becomes a part of us. And then we pause, and then it goes out, and we're constantly exchanging with our environment. And the pressure conditions of that breath, like the pressure rises as the in-breath, and then they lower as the out-breath. It's the most direct way that I've found to contemplate this exchange, the interchange between the positive and negative, just thinking about breath. So yeah, if it's helpful. All right, chapter 6, I'm going to read. Sex-conditioned opposites. The entirety of this balanced universe is thus divided into unbalanced pairs of father-mother sex-conditioned sex mates for the purpose of seemingly dividing universal oneness into a universe of many ones. No matter what names we use to designate one pair of sex mates from another, whether gravity and radiativity, male and female, positive and negative, charge and discharge, centripetal and centrifugal, generative and radiative, integrative and disintegrative, plus and minus, heat and cold, life and death, buyer and seller, producer and consumer, import and export, emptying and filling, inward and outward, north and south, heaven and earth, growth and decay. All of them are similarly conditioned by the two opposite electrical conditioners. In other words, they are all being compressed or expanded if we use pressure terms, or charged and discharged if we use electrical terms. Both are the same. Likewise, all that are being compressed or charged by positive electricity are simultaneously being expanded and discharged by negative electricity to a lesser extent. Likewise, all that are being expanded by negative electricity are simultaneously being compressed and charged by positive electricity to a lesser extent. This is a two-way universe in all effects of motion, and both opposite effects are expressed in both mates simultaneously, as well as sequentially. This two-way universe. Electricity is forever winding up into hot spheres surrounded by cold cube wave fields of space, and likewise sequentially unwinding them for rewinding. While winding them into compressed light masses, they are simultaneously unwinding to a lesser extent. Conversely, while unwinding, they are simultaneously rewinding to a lesser extent. Every opposite of a pair charges in excess of its discharge for one half of its cycle, and then discharges in excess of its charging. Life and death are good examples. Life charges a body in excess of its discharge for one half of its cycle, and death discharges it in excess for the other half. Likewise, the sun charges the earth during half of its 24-hour cycle in excess of its charge on the night side of the planet. The night side sequentially becomes a day side. The discharge of night then reverses to a preponderance of charge. The father-mother principle is fundamental in every expression, and both are simultaneously manifested in every expression, each being preponderant sequentially during half of each cycle. The father principle multiplies light into density and high potential. The mother principle divides it into vapors and gases of lower potential. Light is thus multiplied and divided into suns and planets surrounded by space. The matter of Earth is the same as the matter of heavens, but with one difference: volume. And therein lies the secret of the universal pulse beat. Space is a division of solidity into tenuity. It is also a multiplication of volume at the expense of potential. Interchange between these two unbalanced opposites is the basis of all motion in this rhythmic universe. Sex mates are two equal halves of one. They never can be one. They can never unite, for they are the opposites of motion. Opposites of motion can cease to be, and by thus ceasing to be, they can give birth to the other opposite, but they can never be the other opposite. Opposites born each other. Compression can never expand, but expansion is born from compression. Conversely, expansion can never compress, but compression is born from expansion. They can interchange with their opposites with every pulse beat, and they do. Each opposite is born from the other. Each pulse beat brings each opposite nearer to avoidance of each, and complete interchange into the other. It becomes the other sequentially at the halfway point in its cycle, but it is still an opposite. Opposites oppose. They never perform any other office than to oppose. Opposition alone produces the idea of separateness in a universe of one inseparable thing. The opposite of water is water vapor. Water is a compressed condition. It is the father light. Water vapor is the expanded condition of water. It is of the mother light. They are two halves of one, which never can be one. The mother light unfolds from the father light. The father light refolds the water vapor into water. Each has been born from the other. Each is the other, but they can never unite to become one. All idea of mind is thus divided into sex pairs of opposite mates. Matter is divided into solids and gases. The gases are the solids, outwardly bound toward the heavens. Solids are those same gases, inwardly bound toward gravity. Heat and cold are opposites. Inwardly bound light rays generate heat from cold by compressing cold. Outwardly bound light rays degenerate heat into cold by expanding heat. It is said that cold is less heat. One might as well say that east is less west. East and west are two opposites, just as cold and heat are opposites. Opposite sex conditions born each other. Matter and space likewise are sex mates. Each has become what each is opposing the other to attain, what each is by opposing the other to attain the appearance of separateness. Then each interchanges with each by breathing into and out of each other until space disintegrates matter and becomes what the other was. Space disintegrates suns and earths by the way of equators and generates them by way of poles. Heat generated by cold by the way of poles is radiated by the way of equators. Suns thus turn inside out. Cold bores black holes right through their poles, and great suns become rings, like those in Lyra and other ring nebula, which are plentiful in the heavens. All matter is generated by the degeneration of its opposite. Likewise, all generated matter is sequentially degenerated by the generation of its opposite. Compression in matter is balanced by an equal evacuation in space. Every unbalanced condition in nature must be balanced by an equal opposite. All borrowings from the bank of nature are debited with an amount equal to the credit extended, just as money borrowed from man's bank is debited and credited. Desire for rest follows desire for motion. The two are always two and never can become one, although the desire for oneness is with each during the entirety of its cycle. It is this desire for oneness which causes them to interchange. When credits and debits are balanced by interchange with each other, they cease to be. they do not become one. When electrical opposites thus cancel each other out by interchange of their plus and minus conditions, they do not neutralize each other as commonly believed. They cease to be. Motion cannot be neutralized. There is no exception to this process in nature. All idea is recorded electrically in equal pairs of opposite expressions. Each of the pair cancels the other out in cyclic periodices. Each then becomes what the other was. Generation of any idea exceeds radiation during the first half of its cycle. Radiation then exceeds generation for the second half of the cycle. Both of these simulations of the idea, as expressed by motion, disappear. The idea still exists, however. The idea is at rest in its seed, from which it can again appear in form of idea. The 2 points of rest, which are the fundamentals of every cycle, are the point of beginning at the wave axis and the point of interchange between positive and negative opposites at the wave amplitude. At these 2 rest points, motion has utterly ceased. It has not been neutralized into a condition of rest.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The two are always two and can never become one, although the desire for oneness is with each during the entirety of its cycle. Now, why is that? I mean, can't the one creator become one?
It's a really good and fundamental and important question. And I wonder if anybody has any thoughts about that.
I do. When we read that, and even in the last chapter, it's like I'm envisioning it's the same thing as like doing breath work. I do a breath work and I don't know what it's called right now, but when you do the inhale, you imagine the exhale already happening. And then the opposite way, whenever you do the exhale, you envision the inhale already coming through. So it's like a pulley. It's always in motion. And those in breaths and out breaths, just like our breath that we have now, anyway, without even the practice, will never meet and become one breath unless you hold your breath. And I don't even know if that's even counts, because then you're not really breathing. That's the only thing that's the only example that I could come up with to try to wrap my mind around that statement.
Kent.
Yeah, I see what Jim is getting at, and I think what Walter Russell is speaking about here is the state of things in our manifested reality in the third density. I mean, eventually, we're all going back to becoming one with the Creator. But I think Russell here is speaking about, the current condition in the density that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another way of saying it is, the terms the absolute and the relative. And, the realm of the Creator is the realm of the absolute, where oneness is, and all idea, infinite idea, exists. But in order to have experience of that idea, it needs to be taken apart and manifest into the state of the relative, into the created universe. And I think his point about how they don't become one is because they're portions of the relative, and the relative is occurring within the absolute, but the relative doesn't really become the absolute. I'm not sure why he makes such a big deal of pointing out that the father mother lights never become one. They're always two. I'm not so sure, but it's really seems to be a really important point in his cosmology, is to point that out. And I think it has to do with, again, we'll just continue to sit with this question, but I think it has to do with the application of these concepts, because this isn't just a philosophy. He's building this understanding of how light works in order to build the foundation for science and for industry and for the application of these concepts. And so somehow the distinction of charge never becomes, the two halves of charge, positive and negative, never become whole. They never become one. They go to zero instead. And then they come back out of the plenum and they become charged again, but now oppositely. And that interchanges. So that's the best I have to reply to your question, Jim. It's a really good question. It seems paradoxical and somewhat vexing. Because it seems like what you're saying is like, well, all things are one. So how could a portion of the created universe not be one? Is that getting the
I
gist?
guess in a relative sense, that could well be, but in the ultimate sense, it doesn't seem like it could.
Yeah. Well, in the ultimate, what he says is in the ultimate sense, nothing's happening. It's all illusion, and there's nothing even to base the illusion on. It's all just a dream in God's mind. There is actually no motion. There is actually nothing happening. But of course, that's the great paradox and the great mystery, because here we are on a Zoom call on a Wednesday evening. My name's Aaron. Hi, everyone. Seems like it's happening.
Well, Ra did say that creation begins and ends in mystery.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no spoon.
Rachel's got her hand raised too.
Oh, great. Rachel.
And maybe Diana, your other device has your hand raised.
Speaking of the mother father lights not becoming one, and if they merge, it is zero. What if zero is wholeness?
I think so. I think zero is like the one original idea, or the one whole idea.
It reminds me of 0 point energy, that forgive me for not having my sciencey terms in the forefront of my mind, but it's a quantum physics thing that they were aware of the 0 point energy field for a really long time. And it was so ubiquitous everywhere, in, around, and through all things, that they never even, physicists would not even account the 0 point energy in equations, because they thought, oh, well, it's in everything, it's throughout everything, so it's not affecting anything. And then some physicists started to add 0 point energy into the equation and realized that it fundamentally changes how we think of gravity and all of these principles, all of the Newtonian principles that we're so used to, that we thought we knew how it worked. When you add in the principle of the 0 point energy field, it changes the equation and how we understand these more Newtonian physics principles. And I don't know how that connects, but it just came out of my mouth. So there it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they call that the cosmological constant, and it's an uppercase C in physics, and it often gets just all that huge amount of energy just kind of gets written out and pushed to the side in most physics. And actually Ross speaks directly to that. Ross says, it is well known by your peoples that in every small unit of space, there's a tremendous amount of energy, but little is it considered, or little is it, they say something along those lines. I think Ross speaks to that exact phenomenon that you just named, which is fascinating.
Nia dropped in a comment about dark matter.
Yep, totally. We have 5.5 more pages, 10 minutes. Shall we get to it? Anybody want to read?
I'll read.
Great.
Chapter 7, the sex reproductive principle. All creating things are paired as unbalanced equal and opposite sex mates. Reproduction of two unbalanced mates cannot be repeated until balance has first been restored. The calm surface of the ocean may be broken up into waves, but those waves cannot be repeated until the calm surface of the ocean has been restored to the equilibrium of its rest position, even though that rest position is not maintained. Reproduction begins at the rest point, where the previous wave cycle ends. Reproduction of unbalance must find a fulcrum from which the wave lever may leap into wave expression for repetition of pattern. That is what creation is, merely the repetition of pattern with added pattern forever. This is a universe of waves within waves and waves without waves, pulsing waves of dual light, extending forever outward to the ends of the mirrored space and reflecting back again to microscopic centers of rest from which they may again spring from rest to seek rest through dual motion, but never finding it. This is a sex-divided, opposed, two-way electric universe, which creates and voids through the unbalanced pairs, but reproduces through voided ones. Sexes do not unite. Reproduction of dynamic sex pairs does not come through the union of dynamic sex pairs, but from the voidance of sex condition, and with it, the power of dynamic sex expression, reproduction. Reproduction is not the unity of two opposite halves of one patterned thing. It is the voiding of the power of dynamic expression, which all unbalanced opposites express. Reproduction is the cessation of those two unbalanced conditions, which restores a balance from which similarly patterned negative forms reverse their expressions and become positive forms. Sex opposites reproduce through sex voidance. In this manner, all pattern forms repeat their patterns sequentially. All pairs of unbalanced opposites come from God, the one, and return balanced as one to God. All unbalanced pairs of separately conditioned things must first find voidance of unbalance and voidance of opposition. They must then become their own opposites to again acquire an unbalance necessary for another voidance and consequent repetition. All twos must become voided in the one in order to again become two. Reproduction of unbalanced opposites by unbalanced opposites is impossible. Opposition must first be voided. The dynamic must emerge from rest, and it must be voided in rest in order that it may again become dynamic. The desire for balance. All things seek balance. Two opposed, unbalanced halves of one are forever seeking to balance their opposition. Two children on a seesaw are balanced when they are on a level with their centering fulcrum. When they are on different levels, they are then unbalanced with their centering fulcrum. They are then dynamic. The fulcrum no longer centers them, although they are balanced in themselves. In such a position, they are obliged to move. Repetition of their motion is impossible while they are in balance with their fulcrum, but it's imperative when the fulcrum no longer centers them. A sexless condition is imperative before a sex condition can be repeated. Just as all motion starts from rest and returns to rest, so does a sex electric condition arise from a sexless one. The two sexes, therefore, cannot be united to cause reproduction. They must first be voided. Unbalanced condition and change cannot unite to reproduce unbalanced condition and change. The unbalanced condition and change must be voided in order to repeat unbalance and change. Sex opposites do not neutralize, they void. The sexes, like the two opposites of motion, cannot neutralize each other by so-called union. The dynamic cannot be neutralized. Likewise, it cannot become static, but it can be voided. The static condition does not then take its place, for the static condition is eternal. It was there before the dynamic condition arose. The dynamic condition of sound, for example, arises from the static condition of silence. But sound does not become silence. Sound is voided. Silence is eternal. The dynamic condition of sodium and chlorine do not unite to become the static condition of sodium chloride, nor are they neutralized. They must be voided before they can be repeated. Sex determined by direction of pressures. Opposites are not things. They are conditions of things, just as heat and cold, or east and west, or inward and outward, or compression and expansion cannot unite to become one. So also, the opposite sexes cannot unite, for they are but inward, outward pressures. Sex opposition is a difference in the pressure condition of things. The male condition is one of the compression. The female is one of expansion. The sexes are thus differently conditioned by the two directions of electric pressures in accord with the two opposite desires of the creator. The difference of conditioning makes basically similar substances appear to be different things and different substances. All things are sex divided. When therefore any two opposed and unbalanced sex halves of one conditioned thing balance their opposed conditioning through motion, they appear to become another thing or substance. This appearance is a deception of the senses, for they do not become another thing. They become voided, and another thing from which both are extended appears in their place. In chemistry, we call these pairs stable compounds, such as the salts. Water, for another example, is avoidance of oxygen and hydrogen, for there is no oxygen or hydrogen in water, nor do oxygen and hydrogen become water. Water is the result of the avoidance of two unbalanced and opposed conditions caused by equalizing opposed pressures at static equators. Consider the static condition of the calm ocean. A storm transformed that surface into a dynamic condition. Waves which spring from the static ocean surface towards crests and troughs do not unite to reproduce another wave. They withdraw into the ocean surface. They disappear entirely and then reappear from it in reverse to repeat the next octave. Absolute voidance of one condition must take place before repetition can follow. Voided motion is recorded in the stillness from which it was unfolded, in order that it can be repeated from that record. Records of motion are seeds for repetition of motion. In the seed is desire for manifesting image forms of idea. All forms are wave forms. All wave forms unfold from seed records of those wave forms.
Thank you, Jim.
Can I make a quick micro comment?
Yes.
On page 137, and it's such a treat to listen to you read, Jim. It's like listening to Ra all over again, but you didn't say a whole lot there at the time. But on the top first paragraph up there, you must be already channeling. You're always channeling Ra in my mind, because what you said they disappear entirely and then reappear from it in reverse to repeat the next octave is what you said, instead of the word wave.
Yep.
So that's interesting that you said octave, and I wanted to point that out to you so that maybe you could reflect on why you may have said octave. I'm very curious about that.
Me too.
I'm feeling apologetic. I wish we weren't out of time. I'm sure we could really dive in and unpack this a bunch more.
Yeah.
But maybe we could just go a couple minutes over and just make a little space for people to ask if anyone has any questions or any comments. Kent?
Yeah, he talks in the beginning there, page 2, about reproduction. So the kind of reproduction he talks about here, two unbalanced conditions which restores a balance from which similarly pattern negative. Okay, maybe that's not the right thing to read. Anyway, he's talking about reaching a point where the two void each other, and then they give birth to, then they turn into each other's opposites. So two, in the way he describes it, two always gives birth to two. But in biological reproduction, two can give birth to many more than just two. I mean, humans can have more than two children, a couple, and animals can have a lot more than that. So I was just curious about maybe we shouldn't even bring biological reproduction into it, but there's also the theory of emergent matter, that matter can actually come into being from the instreaming of some kind of spiritual energy. I don't know if that comes from Dewey Larson or where that comes from. And that planets are actually growing because of the inflow of this etheric or spiritual energy, which actually creates new matter. So I don't know, just some random thoughts, if anybody wants to comment on them.
You got a heart from Nia.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nia.
Well, I don't necessarily think there's any disagreement there. I mean, not about the biological reproduction part of your first comment, but in terms of matter coming into, spontaneously coming into existence. Walter Russell continuously makes the point that the universe is always perfectly balanced, because any matter that comes into form in equal and opposite, through equal and opposite charges. So as far as I understand it, the universe is infinite. It's an infinite plenum. It's an infinite matrix. It could contain more and more and more matter. And anything that comes into form would just be coming into form through balance, through this balance process that we're reading about. So, quote unquote, more matter could come in and still the balance of the universe would remain no matter how much comes in.
Okay. That's good. I'm satisfied. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah. And then, just to return to this the repetition about, the conditioned lights never become one, the opposites never become one. My sense is he's kind of doing this poetic thing where he's trying to undo assumptions that we might have formed by building models of our reality and of our universe based on our senses. Because he says that if we just use our five senses to make sense and build a model of the universe, it won't be accurate. It can't be, because we can't perceive what precedes matter.
Right.
And so part of what his repetitive, he says things over and over again in different ways, and then he says it in this way, he says it over again. I think he's trying to undo some assumptions that we've formed by watching, like, a simple example is in chemistry class, if we watch sodium and chloride be poured, I don't know how it forms or whatever, but if we watch it, it looks like, oh, look, they just turned into a different thing. But what we can't see is actually the elements of that are involved blink out. They go back into zero. They go to rest. And then in their place springs another wave. And we can't perceive it with our senses, but actually what's happening is that they're not, one thing isn't becoming another, and two things don't ever become one, but our senses won't tell us that. So he's trying to repattern it. He's right. And I do think it's important, and we may not know why yet, but we'll see. BJ?
What I think you're also pointing to is a big question in science, and also people talk about it in mystical circles of like we tend to think that matter is what's real, and that matter gives rise to consciousness.
Right.
And of course it's the other way around, right? Like consciousness is what's real, and consciousness seemingly gives rise to what we think of as matter, or like things that are separate. And I think that's also what he's pointing to keep saying, that consciousness is, or, as one way of saying it, is ultimately the reality, and matter is what's illusory.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
I think I can't. Could someone mute one of me?
Yeah, I just muted one of you. I might be able to remove the other one of you. Let me see if I can do that, but I don't want to kick you off.
If that happens, it's okay.
Let me try this. Oh, just a second.
You sound like Superwoman. You
It
go,
worked.
girl.
Oh, but now you're muted. Oh gosh. That's so weird.
Can you mime? No.
You want to type a comment?
Sounds like.
Okay. Never mind. She's dropping it.
Darn it.
Tell us
I
next
really
week.
wanted to know what you wanted to say, Diana, but I guess I'm just going to have to resolve that. Well, you all, thanks for sticking with it. I know it's not simple sometimes. I do appreciate the company on this journey, and I am excited about the progress we're making. And I think it's building to greater understanding of the mystery and understanding of oneness and understanding of our place in this great dance of thought that we're taking part in. So thanks for being along for the ride.
This is like Law of One on steroids.
Well, I think Kent was the
That's
one that said that
interesting.
he finds it much more difficult to read this than the Law of One, which I was surprised by, because before we got into the study group, I thought this was going to be easier for everybody, but now I can see how that's not necessarily the case. So I respect where everyone's at. And yeah. Oh, and as a reminder, of course, I've got office hours tomorrow at 11:30. So if anyone wants to come and unpack any of this stuff or just talk about whatever, I'll be there on Zoom. So feel free to come join.
Diana bounced.
I just
Oh, it
found
worked.
myself. I found myself.
Nice.
Yeah, look at that. Thank you, Aaron, for
Do you want to make
hosting
your
the-
comment now?
Yes, please.
It's one you can take away. You can mull over, because I don't know the meaning of it. Ra is in the density of unity, and they say that they are beyond polarity. And when Russell was talking about how the opposites can't become one, but they can, what was the word we were using? You said blink out, Aaron. There was another word, whatever Russell said.
They
Void.
find rest.
Thank you. Void. I think about how, I wonder about how we see Ra as a positive entity, but they're beyond the need for the positive and negative poles, because that's been resolved for them. So they can no longer really be called positive. They're just an aspect of, like, they're experiencing more unity than we are. And that looks like not having a need for those opposite poles anymore. It's just something to think about.
Yep.
That's all.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, everyone. I think I want to release everybody because we're a little bit past time, and I want to respect everyone's schedule. So thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all so much.
Love all y'all.
Really a joy.
Love you
for
guys.
me.
Love everybody.
Have a
Thanks for
wonderful
the study.
night.
Yeah.
Till next
Great
time.
night, everyone.
Night.